My name is Mia, and I'm 32 years old. For most people, their home is their sanctuary, a place of safety and memories built with love and hard work. For me, it became the battlefield where my family's deepest betrayals were laid bare. I never expected the people I trusted the most, my own parents, to use my home as collateral without my knowledge, forging my signature on a $200 loan. They did it to buy my younger brother the house of his dreams. While I was kept in the dark, the moment I discovered this betrayal shattered everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and trust. But it also ignited something fierce inside me, a determination not to be a victim, but to fight back and reclaim my life. The story begins in a quiet suburb just outside Seattle, Washington. It's the kind of place where everyone knows their neighbors, and the streets are lined with maple trees that turn fiery red each autumn. I grew up here, in a modest 2-story house my parents had worked hard to buy. Or so I believed. My father, George, was a bank branch manager for more than 30 years, a man who commanded respect in the community, known for his steady demeanor and no-nonsense approach to business. My mother, Diana, was the heart of our family, always busy managing the household and maintaining the image of a perfect family. But beneath that surface was a world of favoritism and silent resentment. I was the eldest daughter, the responsible one who excelled in school, went to college, and worked hard to build a stable life. My younger brother, Lucas, was the golden child, endlessly favored, and seemingly handed everything on a silver platter. The disparity in how my parents treated us wasn't just noticeable, it was brutal. And it shaped who I became. Buying my own home was supposed to be a milestone of independence and pride. I scrimped, saved, and sacrificed for years, juggling 2 jobs and scholarships to afford the down payment. When I finally closed on the small but charming house on the edge of town, I thought I had carved out a place that was mine alone, a sanctuary from the chaos of family expectations. But that sanctuary was about to be violated in the most devastating way. It started quietly, with a family dinner that seemed like any other forced smiles, awkward conversations, and the usual scripted roles. My dad held court, talking politics with his usual confident air, while my mom hovered around Lucas, showering him with praise and attention. The announcement came suddenly. A casual declaration, masked as good news they had helped Lucas get his dream house. I smiled genuinely on the surface, but something about the way my dad looked at me after the announcement sent a cold shiver down my spine. He told me they had taken out a small loan to cover the down payment and closing costs. And since I was established, it was my responsibility to help the family get a start. The words hung in the air, small loan. Family duty phrases I had heard my whole life. But deep inside, an uneasy feeling began to grow. I nodded along, biting back questions, because in our family, asking too much only stirred trouble. I convinced myself it was just another case of lending money to Lucas, something I'd eventually be asked to help with. But 3 days later, the truth hit me like a freight train. It wasn't a phone call. An email. Hora private confesión. It was a thick envelope from my mortgage company, slipped in among junk mail and bills. My heart pounded as I slid it open and saw the headline, a $200 home equity line of credit had been taken out on my house without my knowledge or consent. The forged signature at the bottom of the document was a crude imitation of mine. My hands trembled, the paper nearly slipping from my grasp. This wasn't just about money. This was about trust, about a place I had built with my own blood, sweat, and tears. My home was no longer mine. It was collateral for my brother's perfect life, a life I had helped build with every sacrifice I made, now used against me. As the silence from that Sunday dinner replayed in my mind, everything suddenly made horrifying sense. It wasn't my quiet acceptance that had filled the room, it was the stunned disbelief of someone whose foundation had been ripped out from under them. Before anger could even take root, memories rushed in like ghosts from my past. 32 years of being the family strong one, the reliable daughter who never asked for anything, who bore the brunt of expectations without complaint. I wasn't just a daughter. I was a resource, a bank account, a safety net, but never a person to be valued equally. I thought back to my 18th birthday, sitting at that same worn dining table, clutching my college acceptance letter, like a golden ticket. I was the first in my family to attend a 4-year university, studying computer science, a field my parents barely understood, but one I hoped would lead me to a better future. I remember my father's grimace as he looked at the tuition bill, as if it were a personal insult. "That's a lot of money for playing with computers," he said, his voice heavy with disappointment. I figured it out anyway, working late nights, stocking shelves, bussing tables on weekends, writing scholarship essays, all while feeling the sting of being the family's financial burden rather than their pride. Lucas didn't have to struggle. When he turned 18, instead of a college acceptance, he got a brand new cherry red Mustang. Courtesy of my parents, I was home for a weekend, driving my old, leaking Honda Civic, and the bitter taste of injustice filled my mouth. When I dared to mention it, Dad's answer was chilling. I was the responsible one, the strong one, the one they never had to worry about. Lucas was sensitive and needed more help. That twisted compliment was actually a license to neglect me. My successes and struggles were never my own. They were family assets, to be distributed as the adults saw fit. When I landed my first big job at a tech firm, my mother's congratulations came with a hidden agenda. "Now you can help Lucas with his rent." When I bought my home, they saw it not as a victory but as an opportunity. So much space for just one person. My father mused. Lucas should move into the spare bedroom until he gets on his feet. Lucas was 29 then. Yet my parents still treated him like a child needing constant rescue. Every memory was another brick in a wall that had been built silently between us for decades. The forged loan wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was the final, damning proof of a lifetime of neglect and exploitation. I sank onto my couch, letter clenched in my fist, feeling the room close in, walls pulsating with silent screams of injustice. I needed someone who wouldn't gaslight me with tired cliches about family duty. My hands shaking, I called Sarah, my closest friend and confidant since college. She understood banking, had seen the family scripts before, and when I sent her a picture of the letter, her reaction was immediate and fierce. "This is identity theft. Your dad knew exactly what he was doing." The cold realization hit me hard. My father, with all his years as a bank manager, knew the ins and outs of the system. He knew how to forge documents that could slip past preliminary checks, how to package this so it seemed legitimate. The man who was supposed to protect me had orchestrated my downfall. And in that moment, the anger that had been a block of ice in my chest finally melted into a tidal wave of grief and rage. They hadn't just taken money. They had taken my peace, my safety, my home. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, my professional composure crumbling for the first time in years. I was no longer just the responsible daughter. I was a woman betrayed, ready to fight back. After hanging up with Sarah, I sat in my silent living room, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like an invisible storm. My sanctuary, the one place I'd poured years of sweat and tears into, was no longer mine. The thought that my parents, my own blood, had drilled a hole in the foundation of my life to build my brother's dream left me breathless. It was more than just a financial wound. It was a deep, raw cut into the heart of what family was supposed to mean. The familiar hum of the city outside my window felt distant, like I was trapped in a bubble of cold isolation. I didn't want to call my parents immediately. I needed time to process, to build a plan. The anger simmered beneath my skin, But it was the heartbreak that was hardest to bear, the feeling that everything I had worked for was considered expendable. They didn't just see me as a daughter. They saw me as a bank account, a resource to be tapped into when convenient. And Lucas, he was the golden child, the favored son whose happiness trumped my stability and peace. It was a lifetime of inequality, compressed into one devastating act. The next morning, I found myself staring at my computer screen, searching for the best lawyer I could find, someone tough, experienced, and relentless. I needed an expert who could untangle this mess and hold my parents accountable. After hours of research, I found Michael Wilson, a no-nonsense attorney known for taking on complex fraud cases. His client testimonials praised his sharp mind and unwavering dedication. This was the kind of ally I needed. My fingers trembled as I dialed his number. A calm voice answered, and I explained my situation briefly but clearly forged signature. Lambe. 000 loan on my home. And my parents' involvement. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, words that once would have been unthinkable to say about the people who raised me. Michael didn't interrupt or express sympathy. He listened with the kind of focus that made me feel taken seriously for the first time in years. He warned me this would get ugly, legally and personally, but that we had a solid case. The moment I hung up, the fight truly began. I called my parents to tell them I was coming over. The tone I used was neutral, almost cold, but beneath it simmered a storm of pent-up emotions. My mother, oblivious or willfully blind, cheerfully agreed. They'd invited Lucas and his fiancée, Jenna, to celebrate the new house purchase. Perfect. A captive audience for what I was about to unleash. I drove over, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Walking into their living room was like stepping onto a stage where I was both the protagonist and the antagonist. The laughter that filled the room died the moment they saw me. I didn't bring a smile or a bottle of wine. I carried the envelope with the forged loan documents, the silent evidence of their betrayal. My mother, Diana, plastered on a hostess smile, greeted me with false warmth that made my skin crawl. "Mia, what a surprise," she said, but I held up my hand, cutting through her performance. "Sit down." "Mom," I said, my voice flat and unwavering. She froze, stunned into silence by my sudden firmness. I placed the envelope on the coffee table, our family's old centerpiece, worn from years of birthday cakes and board games, and slid the documents out carefully. My father, George, glanced at them, and for a fleeting moment, I saw panic flicker behind his mask of authority. Lucas looked confused, his brow furrowed in slow realization. Jenna, the outsider who had watched our family's dynamic from the sidelines, suddenly grew pale, her eyes darting between the paper and me. "I received this today," I said, voice low but clear. "It's a loan, $200. Nil taken out against my house. My signature is forged on this document." My mother gasped, clutching her chest like she'd been stabbed, performing shock so perfectly it was almost laughable. "Someone must have stolen your identity." "Mia," she said, her voice thick with feigned concern. I ignored her and looked straight at my father. "Someone did," I replied. "Someone who knew my social security number, probably from my old tax returns in the attic. Someone who knew the mortgage company and how to make this look legit. Someone who used to be a bank branch manager." The color drained from George's face. He looked like a man caught in the headlights of his own lies. Lucas, still struggling to grasp what was happening, shifted uncomfortably. "We did it to help you," my father blurted, as if that justified everything. "It's family. You just don't understand." I let out a bitter laugh, one without humor. "Family. You took the roof over my head, the one thing I've ever truly owned, and put it on the line without even telling me. You forged my signature on a federal document. That's not family. That's fraud. It's a felony. My mother's carefully crafted mask shattered instantly. Don't be so dramatic. Mia, it's just a loan. You have a good job. You can afford to help. And that house is too big for you anyway, all alone. Lucas and Jenna need a proper family home to start their life. The words hit me like a physical blow. The house was too big for me. To them, my success and independence were wasted. I was a resource pool. Nothing more. Her cold dismissal erased any remaining doubt I had about where I stood in their eyes. I turned my gaze to Lucas. Did you know about this? I asked. Voice I see. He mumbled a weak excuse. His eyes avoiding mine. They were just trying to help. I didn't think it was a big deal. The control I had been clinging to finally slipped. A big deal. You stood by while they stole from me. You were going to live in a house built on my stolen security. That's not a big deal, Jenna, who had been frozen, suddenly stood up, pale and shaking. I didn't know, she said. They told me it was a gift, not stolen money. My father tried to regain control, booming about family loyalty and support. But I wasn't listening. This was no longer about saving face. They were all complicit, the architects, the beneficiary, the enabler. I folded the letter and put it back in the envelope. My movement slow and deliberate. Tomorrow, I have a meeting with my lawyer, I said, voice steady. After that, I will report this fraud to the bank's corporate fraud department. They will investigate. And I will not pay a single cent of this loan. My mother gasped, voice trembling with desperate pleas. You wouldn't do that to your own family. I looked her dead in the eye. You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. Turning away, I left the house and walked into the cold evening air, feeling the weight of their silent stares burn into my back. My father's voice followed me, laced with rage and fear. You'll regret this. Mia, you're turning your back on your family. I paused, hand on the door handle. No. Dad, you turned your back on me a long time ago. I'm just seeing it now. That night, alone in my house, the fight I never asked for had begun. The next morning, I found myself in the sleek, polished office of Michael Wilson, Minu Lover. The contrast between the cold professionalism of his surroundings and the emotional chaos I left behind at my parents' house was stark. Michael was a man in his late 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and an aura of quiet confidence. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. I laid out the entire story, from the forged signature to the $200 000 loan, and the decades of silent favoritism that had led to this betrayal. I placed the loan documents on his desk. Like a smoking gun, he examined them carefully, his face unreadable. This is not a family disagreement, he said, steepling his fingers thoughtfully. This is bank fraud, a federal offense. Given your father's history as a bank manager, there is clear intent here. Your mother and brother may be considered co-conspirators. The bank will not take this lightly. They'll investigate thoroughly and likely pursue criminal charges. Hearing the words criminal charges sent a cold shiver down my spine. I had imagined lawsuits and financial stress. But jail? The possibility was terrifying. Yet, it also awakened something fierce inside me. The old Mia, the obedient daughter who swallowed every injustice, was gone. This was about justice, about reclaiming control. My goal is simple. I told Michael, I want that loan removed from my house. My name cleared. And to ensure this never happens again. Michael nodded. First step, a certified letter to the bank's fraud department. Officially notify them you are a victim of identity theft. We'll also send a cease and desist to your parents, meaning all communication must go through my office. Are you ready for what comes next? This will get ugly. I swallowed hard but nodded. It's already ugly. I'm just turning on the lights. The fallout started immediately. My phone exploded with calls and texts. My mother's voicemails ranged from tearful pleas, "Mia, please. We can fix this," to venomous accusations of ingratitude. My father left a single, curt message, warning me to back off or face consequences. I deleted them all without hesitation. Their attempts to manipulate me with guilt, fear, and obligation were futile. Then came the flying monkey's relatives swept into the family drama by my parents' narratives. Aunt Carol pleaded for mercy, calling me cruel. Uncle Stan texted about keeping the family together. Their words were rehearsed, casting me as the villain for daring to hold my parents accountable. That evening, a knock at my apartment door startled me. It was Lucas, disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, smelling faintly of whiskey. "You've ruined my life," he hissed. Storming in, I closed the door behind him, blocking his path. Calmly, I told him the truth. My parents, had destroyed his life. Not me. Jenna had left him, unable to marry into a family of criminals. His father, Thomas Chen, was furious, calling us grifters. Lucas begged for forgiveness, promising to repay the money, asking me to call off the lawyers. But I saw through it all the same week. Entitled boy, who had been spoiled his whole life and never taught to face consequences honestly. It's too late for that. "Lucas, this is in the hands of the law now. You need to go home." He stared, disbelief etched into his face. Truly believing I would bend, I opened the door, and he stumbled out like a wounded child. That night, after Lucas left, I listened to a voicemail from my mother. Gone were the tears and anger, replaced by icy venom. "You were always jealous of Lucas," she spat. "You'd rather see us destroyed than see him happy. You're no longer our daughter." The cold finality hit me like a blow. Yet, strangely, it didn't hurt. It was a release. She had amputated me from the family. And for the first time, I felt free. The following day, a call came from an unknown number. It was Jenna. Her voice trembled as she apologized profusely, unaware of the full extent of the betrayal. She told me Thomas Chen wanted to meet me. A meeting with Thomas, a self-made millionaire and man of principle, could change everything. The meeting was set at my grandparents' 50th anniversary party, a tense gathering of family and friends under the pretense of celebration but charged with silent war. As I entered the lavish country club, I felt every eye on me, every whispered judgment. My parents were there, performing their usual political smiles for the guests. When they saw me, their expressions twisted into masks of disdain and anger. They turned their backs, making it clear I was an outcast. Some relatives glanced at me with pity, others with suspicion. But Emily, my cousin, found me by the bar and quietly offered her support, admitting that she and others had long noticed the favoritism and unfairness I endured. The tension broke when Thomas Chen and his wife arrived. Thomas's commanding presence shifted the atmosphere. His sharp eyes scanned the room, resting briefly on me with a nod of respect. My parents immediately approached them, their fake warmth transparent. Soon, my mother, fueled by champagne and desperation, interrupted a conversation between Thomas and me with a loud accusation, painting me as the family villain trying to destroy everything. The room fell silent. Thomas's response was swift and devastating. He addressed my father directly, recalling his banking career and the legal consequences of forgery. His words hung in the air. Federal statutes, prison sentences, FBI investigations. My parents were caught off guard, the facade of control cracking visibly. As the party watched in stunned silence, Thomas handed me his business card, offering a position as CTO in his new company. He praised my integrity and strength, qualities my family had long overlooked. With that, They left, their departure like a social and emotional earthquake that reduced my parents' carefully constructed world to rubble. Left alone with the card in my hand, I felt a mix of triumph and exhaustion. The battlefield was not yet over, but a new chapter was beginning, one where I could reclaim my power and define my future on my own terms. The morning after the anniversary party felt surreal. The air was thick with anticipation and dread as I sat in Michael Wilson's office, awaiting updates on the bank's reaction. Michael's phone call came with swift clarity. The bank's fraud department had officially opened an investigation, freezing the $200. Zero line of credit immediately. The corporate machinery had begun turning, and soon federal investigators would be involved. The reality sank in this was no longer just a personal battle. It was a legal war with severe consequences for my parents. Michael was pragmatic but blunt. Your parents have one move left. They can repay the loan in full and hope the bank considers the matter closed financially. Even then, the prosecutors might still press charges, but it's their only shot at avoiding prison. The weight of this ultimatum pressed down on me. I wasn't looking for revenge, but justice. And justice had a price my parents were about to pay in ways I could hardly imagine. The phone rang again, but this time it was from a lawyer I didn't know, representing my parents. The voice was weary, defeated. They wanted to negotiate a settlement. My terms were non-negotiable: full repayment, legal acknowledgement of their fraud, reimbursement of my legal fees, and a permanent cease and desist order preventing any further contact with me or my assets. It was a clean break, a severing of ties that had long been poisoned. Within an hour, their lawyer agreed. The final meeting was scheduled in Michael's sterile conference room. The atmosphere was suffocating, thick with unspoken resentment. My parents appeared haggard and broken, shadows of the domineering figures they once were. Mark trailed behind them, a hollow shell of the confident boy who'd once had everything handed to him. As Michael laid out the documents, a cashier's check for $21, $450 covering the loan and fees, and the no-contact settlement, I watched their faces drain of color. The reality of their sacrifices hit hard. They had mortgaged their own future, liquidated assets, and gambled their golden years to make this right. My father's hand trembled violently as he signed. The authoritative signature I remembered, reduced to a frail scrawl. My mother's eyes, usually so sharp and fiery, met mine one last time, a hollow void where love and remorse might have been. I braced myself, expecting anger or tears, but there was only emptiness. She signed without hesitation. The deal was done. They stood and left, silent and defeated, leaving behind the echoes of a family shattered. Sitting alone, I felt no victory, no sweet triumph. Instead, a profound, solemn peace washed over me. It was the peace of survival after amputation. The loss was deep, but necessary. The toxic bonds severed, leaving space to heal and rebuild. When I stepped out into the bright sunlight, the weight of years lifted. For the first time, I was truly free. The months that followed were a journey of rediscovery. The silence was deafening at first. The absence of constant family drama and manipulation felt strange. Slowly, it transformed into peace. Vacants were mine again, filled with hikes, books, and quiet moments of nothingness. No more calls demanding money or loyalty. No more passive-aggressive messages or emotional blackmail. My life was finally my own. That black business card Thomas Chen had given me sat on my desk, a symbol of possibility. It represented a crossroads, the safe but unfulfilling corporate job, or the uncertain, thrilling challenge of building something new. The old me would have clung to security, afraid to risk it all. But that version of me was gone, buried beneath years of betrayal and rebirth. One morning, I dialed Thomas's number. His calm voice on the other end was like a lifeline. We met for lunch the next day, surrounded by the quiet clinks of silverware and low murmur of deals. Thomas didn't waste time. He shared his vision of a logistics company revolutionized by predictive technology. A market ignored by giants but ripe for innovation. He wasn't offering me a job, he was offering a partnership. He wanted me to be his CTO, the architect of the entire digital infrastructure. His faith in my integrity and skills was a balm to wounds I didn't know could heal. Accepting was the first truly joyful decision I'd made in years. I handed in my notice, walking away from golden handcuffs and a comfort zone that had become a cage. Sarah, my best friend and rock, soon joined me, cashing out her stock options to become our chief of operations. Together, we transformed a tiny rented office into a hive of creation, coding late into the nights fueled by endless coffee and determination. Thomas became more than a business partner. He became a mentor and father figure, the kind of support I never had growing up. His expectations were high but fair, teaching me the nuances of leadership and strategy. His wife, Linda, welcomed me warmly into their home, offering a glimpse of the family I had always yearned for but never known. Their kindness contrasted sharply with the coldness of my own bloodline. Then, almost a year later, a call came from an unexpected source. My mother's voice, trembling and hesitant, reached me across the phone lines. She told a litany of hardships, health issues, financial struggles, therapy for Lucas and Jenna, but it was not an apology. It was a ledger of misery, a bid to make me feel responsible. I responded calmly, detached. I hope you're happy. Her parting words stabbed deeply. You're no longer our daughter. Yet, instead of pain, I felt clarity and closure. The woman on the other end was a stranger, trapped in her own self-pity and denial. I had chosen my path, and it was one of strength and freedom. Life continued to flourish around me. The office buzzed with energy and laughter. Sarah's infectious optimism balanced my own quiet determination. Thomas was closing deals, growing our vision into reality. This was my family now chosen, supportive, and real. Then, one day, a thick envelope arrived. It was from Lucas and Jenna, an invitation to their wedding. Now genuine and modest. A handwritten note from Lucas expressed his remorse and efforts to change. The old wounds tugged at me, but I was no longer ruled by bitterness. I accepted the invitation, ready to face the past with grace, not anger. At the vineyard wedding, surrounded by friends, colleagues, and my new family, I spotted my parents across the lawn. They looked smaller, out of place, to the tension between us palpable, but softened by time. My mother's attempt to approach me was gently stopped by my father, who seemed resigned. When we finally exchanged words, it was without anger, just quiet acknowledgement. I walked away, turning towards Lucas and Jenna with a sense of forgiveness and hope. Their journey was just beginning, as was mine. Here is part 4. About 6,000 characters, flowing smoothly with consistent logic and ending each segment with a strong, emotional, or suspenseful beat. The morning after the anniversary party was unnervingly quiet. The calm before a storm I already knew was coming. Sitting in Michael Wilson's office, I waited for news from the bank. When the call came, it confirmed everything I feared. The fraud department had launched a full investigation and frozen the $200. Zero. Home equity line of credit. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. It was federal business. The weight of it settled on me like a stone my parents were about to face, consequences they never imagined. Michael was blunt. They have one last chance, repay the full loan plus fees immediately. The bank may then consider it closed financially. But prosecutors could still pursue charges. This is their only shot at avoiding prison. The stakes were clear. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about justice, accountability, and finally breaking free from a lifetime of manipulation. I wasn't seeking vengeance. I was demanding fairness. Almost immediately, my phone rang again. But this time it was a lawyer representing my parents. The voice on the other end was tired, defeated, but professional. They wanted to negotiate. I laid down the law: full repayment, a signed legal agreement acknowledging the fraud, coverage of my legal fees, and a permanent no-contact clause. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about closure. To my surprise, within the hour, they agreed. The final meeting took place in a sterile conference room that smelled of paper and quiet defeat. My parents appeared broken, shadows of their former selves. Mark trailed behind them, his confident facade stripped away, replaced by emptiness. Michael presented 2 documents, a cashier's check for the full amount and the settlement agreement. My parents' faces drained as they realized the price they would pay liquidating assets, mortgaging their own home, burning through their savings to make this right. My father's hand trembled as he signed. The confident, authoritative signature I once admired, reduced to a shaky scrawl. My mother met my eyes one last time. But the fire was gone. Only emptiness remained. No remorse. No apology. Just cold acceptance. They signed and left silently, like defeated soldiers retreating from a lost battle. He sat alone afterward, feeling no triumph, no joy. Instead, a solemn peace settled in a quiet calm born from surviving necessary amputation. I stepped outside into the sun, finally feeling free from the invisible chains that had bound me for years. The following months were a journey of healing. The silence left by their absence was deafening at first, but slowly turned into peace. My weekends were mine to fill, however I wanted: hiking, reading, or simply resting without guilt or obligation. The toxic noise that had surrounded me vanished, replaced by calm and clarity. That black business card Thomas Chen had handed me became my symbol of new beginnings. It represented a choice: the comfort of my steady corporate job, or the thrilling risk of building something from scratch. The old me would have clung to security. But that Mia had died. I was ready for a fresh start. I called Thomas and we met for lunch, over quiet conversation and simple food. He outlined his vision: a logistics company powered by cutting-edge predictive technology, targeting a market neglected by big players. It was ambitious, complex, and exactly the challenge I craved. He wasn't offering me a job, he was offering a partnership. CTO, architect of his new company's digital backbone. His faith in me healed wounds I thought were permanent. Accepting was a declaration of independence. I quit my old job, shedding golden handcuffs. And a month later, Sarah joined as COO. We started in a tiny office, fueled by late nights and endless coffee. Building brick by digital brick, a company founded on trust and integrity, not lies. Thomas became more than a business partner. He was the mentor and father figure I never had. Tough but fair. He taught me leadership, strategy, and respect. Linda, his wife, welcomed me warmly into their home, a sanctuary of warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness of my childhood. Nearly a year later, my mother called. Her voice trembled with a rehearsed litany of hardships, health issues, financial strain, therapy for Lucas and Jenna, but no apology. Just a demand for sympathy, a bill for my compassion. I answered calmly, "I hope you're happy." Her final words cut deep. "You're no longer our daughter." Yet, instead of pain, I felt clarity and freedom. The woman on the line was a stranger trapped in denial. While I was reborn, life flourished around me. The office buzzed with energy and laughter. Sarah's optimism balanced my resolve. Thomas was closing deals, expanding our vision. This was my chosen family built on respect, not blood or obligation. Then came the invitation: Lucas and Jenna's wedding. Simple, genuine, and humbling. Lucas's handwritten note confessed regret and efforts to change. The wounds tugged at me, but I was no longer ruled by bitterness. I accepted, ready to face the past with grace, not anger. At the vineyard, surrounded by friends and colleagues, I spotted my parents small, out of place, shadows at the edge of celebration. My mother started to approach but was gently stopped by my father. When we finally spoke, there was no anger, only quiet acknowledgement. I turned away and walked to Lucas and Jenna. Their eyes held shame and hope. "You came," Lucas whispered. Disbelief and gratitude mixed. "I asked," I said, clapping his shoulder in forgiveness and moving on. That night, laughing with Sarah, discussing strategy with Thomas, and dancing beneath twinkling lights, I realized my story was just beginning. My parents were a closed chapter. I held the pen now. Story 2. I showed up to what was supposed to be a casual family dinner at the local community center, expecting maybe a few relatives, some home-cooked food, and quiet conversation. Instead, I found myself stepping into a crowd of nearly 90 people. A DJ setting up in the corner, colorful balloons everywhere, and a huge banner stretched across the back wall that read, "Surprise baby shower with my brother Chris and his wife Lauren's names," shining brightly in bold letters. The first jolt of confusion was quickly replaced by a sinking feeling in my stomach. As I scanned the scene, there was laughter, gift bags being handed out, people snapping photos, and my family looking like they were at the party of the year. I was standing there, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, suddenly feeling like an outsider in my own family's celebration. My mom, with that familiar smirk, was near the dessert table, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. I barely had time to say hello before my phone buzzed a notification from my bank app that made my heart drop. Over $10,000 had disappeared from my account overnight, spent on the venue, catering, party planning, and entertainment. They had used my year-end bonus, my hard-earned money, without telling me a word. My mother's words echoed coldly. "It's for family. Don't be selfish." I forced a smile and nodded, swallowing the shock. I didn't want to make a scene in front of all those guests. But inside, a storm was brewing. That night, back in my apartment, the weight of betrayal settled in my chest like a stone. I took out every bank document I had, logged into every account, and began what would be a long night of unraveling the truth. By midnight, I had frozen every account linked to me, reversed unauthorized charges, and filed reports of fraud with my bank. The caterer's invoice bounced. The DJ's final payment was revoked. Even the card my mother loved to use, a backup I had long forgotten, was declined. I felt a cold clarity. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was entitlement disguised as family love, a selfish grab for my generosity. Morning came, and with it a furious pounding on my front door. It was Chris, my brother, eyes wild with anger and panic, demanding answers. I watched him from the peephole, pacing back and forth, fists clenched, shouting my name like I was the one who'd committed a crime. When I finally cracked the door open, he pushed past greetings and launched into a tirade about how I'd humiliated the family, how Mom had only acted out of love, and how I had the money to spare. His words stung the assumption that my success meant my finances were a family resource, a shared pot from which they could draw freely. Without asking, I asked him simply, "Did anyone tell me about this? Or was it easier to keep me in the dark while using my name like a checkbook?" He had no answer, only more blame and excuses. I told him to leave. He called me selfish, and I shut the door on the family I thought I knew. But this was only the beginning. Over the next days, the calls and texts flooded in from my mom, my aunts, even my usually quiet dad who lives 2 states away. Their voices carried the same message: I had overreacted. I was tearing the family apart. I owed my brother and should have kept quiet. I ignored them all, Their sense of betrayal wasn't about stolen money. It was that I dared to say no. As the truth unfolded, I discovered months of hidden charges, groceries, spa visits, even car payments, all siphoned from accounts I'd long since stopped monitoring. Over $14,000 taken slowly, carefully, without a single word to me. The shock was a sharp, cold slap, but beneath it, a fierceness grew. I wasn't just angry. I was determined. This had to stop. Boundaries had to be drawn. I wasn't their ATM. I hired a lawyer, filed civil claims, and refused to back down, even as the family's messages grew desperate and hostile. My mother's guilt trips turned into threats. My brother's apologies were half-hearted and filled with blame. Yet, I stood firm. This was about more than money. It was about respect, trust, and reclaiming my worth. And as I sat alone that night, I knew there was no turning back. The family I thought I had was gone, but the woman I was becoming was just getting started. Days after I cut off the payments and drew my line in the sand, the family chaos erupted like a storm long held back. Messages flooded my phone, texts from my mother pleading, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and desperation. Calls from aunts, who alternated between guilt, tripping, and veiled threats. Even distant relatives demanding explanations I wasn't prepared to give. They framed me as the villain, selfish, cold, ungrateful. But beneath their outrage, I sensed panic. The money had stopped flowing, and suddenly their world was crumbling. Vendors began calling the house, the caterer demanding immediate payment, the DJ threatening legal action, and the venue holding firm on the balance due. My brother's wife's family caught wind of the financial mess and started questioning my family's reliability, casting shadows over what should have been a joyous occasion. Their smiles at the party had been a mask, and now that mask was cracking. Throughout it all, I remained silent, refusing to engage in their blame game. I wasn't about to let their twisted narrative drag me into a fight I had no intention of losing. The pain wasn't just financial, it was personal. I had been the family's silent provider, their invisible safety net. And now they acted like I had betrayed them by simply refusing to be exploited. The weight of years spent supporting others without thanks pressed on me. But this time, I held firm. My attorney helped me draft formal cease and desist letters, sending a clear message: no more unauthorized use of my finances. No more exploitation under the guise of family. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. Setting boundaries had become survival. One evening, a knock at my door interrupted my work. I opened it to find my father standing there, weary and worn, carrying the fatigue of years I hadn't seen before. He confessed that he, too, had been a victim of my mother's reckless spending, draining his accounts for her sister's benefit without his knowledge. The cracks in the family facade were deeper than I imagined. His support gave me unexpected strength, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this fight. Yet, the fight had only just begun. My mother's calls turned from pleading to bitter accusations, her voice sharp as she tried to manipulate me back into submission. My brother avoided direct contact but sent passive messages through mutual friends, all weaving a narrative that painted me as the cold-hearted disruptor of family harmony. I was unmoved. The family group chat exploded, with heated debates, siblings accusing each other, cousins picking sides. But I stayed out of it, knowing that true power lay in silence and control. I focused on rebuilding my life on my terms, severing every financial tie that bound me to their chaos, closing old joint accounts, changing passwords, switching banks. Every step was a reclaiming of my independence. Months passed, and the family's influence faded like a ghost in the wind. Legal actions were filed, some threats made, but none shook my resolve. Slowly, the peace I craved began to seep back into my life. I traveled, spent evenings with friends who truly cared, and rediscovered the joy of living without the weight of others' demands on my shoulders. One afternoon, a message came from an unexpected source, my cousin, quietly confessing that he had always suspected my mother's misuse, but was too afraid to speak up. His words reminded me that sometimes breaking free means standing alone, even when it means being the bad guy. The final blow came when my mother's attempts to use my name for business leverage crumbled under legal scrutiny. Their real estate company, once a pillar of family pride, faltered and eventually folded. I never gloated. I let their downfall speak for itself. Looking back, I realized the betrayal had been a catalyst, a painful but necessary awakening. What they saw as my coldness was actually my courage to demand respect, my refusal to be a silent victim. And as I stood on the edge of this new chapter, I felt something I hadn't in years hope. Because sometimes, breaking free from your past is the only way to truly find yourself. Weeks slipped by after the storm of confrontation and cold silences, and the dust seemed to settle. Yet, the echo of what had happened lingered heavily on my mind. I thought the hardest part was overcutting ties, setting boundaries, but the real challenge was learning to live in the aftermath of betrayal and reclaim my sense of self without the familiar safety net I had once provided. During those first few days of peace, I found myself revisiting old memories, both tender and painful. The late-night calls to bail them out, the quiet sacrifices no one ever noticed, the unspoken expectation that I would always be there. Each memory was a stitch unraveling from the fabric of a family that never truly embraced me as an equal. But it was also a reminder of the strength I had cultivated in silence, the resilience forged through years of being invisible and indispensable at once. I threw myself into work, diving deep into projects that demanded my full attention. Yet even amid deadlines and meetings, my mind kept drifting back to the conversation with my father, the admission that the betrayals ran deeper than I imagined, that others had been blindsided too. That moment felt like a crack in the glass wall of my isolation, a hint that I was not alone, even if I had been made to feel that way for so long. Late one night, a message popped up from my cousin, a quiet acknowledgement of the family's tangled web and his regrets for not speaking out sooner. His words were simple but heavy. Sometimes, the first to say no has to be the bad guy. That truth resonated with me in a way nothing else had. I wasn't just breaking free from them, I was rewriting my own story. And that meant enduring their judgment. Around the same time, I began noticing subtle shifts in the people around me. Friends who had seen my struggle offered quiet support, reminding me of my worth beyond the role they'd forced upon me. Meanwhile, the family drama swirled on without me, their attempts to reel me back into their orbit, growing more desperate, yet less effective. It was as if I had slipped through their fingers, and the harder they tried, the more distant I became. One afternoon, an unexpected email landed in my inbox, my mother's lawyer, requesting a meeting. I prepared carefully, wary but composed. When the day came, I sat across from her legal team, calmly listening as they tried to negotiate, to twist the story, to reignite old guilt. I responded not with anger but with facts and firm boundaries. I made it clear that forgiveness was not a currency I was willing to trade for exploitation. The legal battles were draining, yes, but also clarifying. Each hearing, each letter, was a step toward reclaiming my life and making the past accountable. Their attempts to leverage our shared history backfired as the truth emerged, and their credibility waned. I wasn't just defending my finances, I was defending my dignity. Throughout this ordeal, I nurtured new relationships, people who saw me, truly saw me, without expectation or judgment. They became the family I chose, reminding me that belonging isn't always tied by blood. And slowly, I began to heal, piece by piece, rediscovering joy in the quiet moments and confidence in my voice. Yet, even in healing, the scars remained a reminder of the price of standing up for oneself, when those closest would rather see you silent. That duality of pain and power shaped who I was becoming. Stronger, wiser, and unafraid. As I sat one evening, watching the sunset bleed gold into the city skyline, I realized that while I had lost much, I had gained something more valuable: freedom. Freedom not just from their demands, but from the silent burden of invisibility. But just as I was settling into this new chapter, a message arrived that threatened to pull me back into the shadows of the past. An anonymous tip that my mother was attempting to use my name in a business deal, exploiting the very reputation I had built on my own. It was a reminder that while I could move forward, some battles never fully end. This unexpected twist set the stage for a final confrontation, a moment where I would have to decide whether to show mercy or stand firm once and for all. The weight of that decision pressed on me, the tension palpable as I prepared for what was to come next. And so, the story continued, one of resilience, justice, and the quiet power of a woman refusing to be invisible any longer. The news hit me like a cold wave, a business inquiry using my name, my reputation, and my hard-earned credibility without my consent. The anonymous tip was clear: my mother was leveraging our family connection to open doors I had fought years to build, hoping to cash in on the success she'd long dismissed. The betrayal cut deeper than before, not just financial, but personal. As if the scars I thought were healing were torn wide open again. I felt the familiar surge of disbelief mixed with a simmering resolve, the fire reigniting in my chest. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control, respect, and finally closing the chapter on a toxic legacy. I sat down with my lawyer to map out a strategy not just legal but personal. The message I wanted to send had to be crystal clear. My boundaries were non-negotiable, and any misuse of my name or reputation would be met with swift and decisive action. We drafted cease and desist letters to every contact my mother had approached, warning them off with legal teeth behind the words. The silence that followed was deafening. No more calls, no more veiled attempts to draw me back in. But the weight of that silence was heavy, too, filled with the unspoken understanding that this was the final severance. Yet, amidst the cold calculations and legal maneuvering, I found unexpected strength in a message from my cousin, Daniel. He wasn't the loudest voice in the family, but his quiet support grounded me. He admitted he'd always seen the cracks in our family facade but had been too afraid to speak up. His words reminded me that even in fractured families, alliances could form, and healing wasn't always solitary. It was a small beacon of hope in a landscape littered with broken promises and silent betrayals. But with hope came the reality that my family's web was tangled deeper than I'd imagined. And not all threads would be easy to cut. The court proceedings that followed were tense but uneventful, with my mother's lawyer trying to muddy the waters with emotional pleas and half-truths. I kept my composure, armed with facts, receipts, and a firm belief in my right to protect what was mine. Each hearing peeled back layers of deception, and with every step forward, I felt the scales tipping toward justice. But the process was a slow burn, testing my patience and resolve, reminding me that true victory wasn't always immediate but must be earned through endurance. Outside the courtroom, life continued. I found solace in my work, my friends, and the small moments that reminded me I was more than the sum of my family's expectations. I began volunteering at a local community center, helping others rebuild after their own betrayals and losses. In giving back, I reclaimed pieces of myself I hadn't realized were missing: the capacity to trust, to hope, and to believe in kindness despite past wounds. But even as I moved forward, the ghost of that baby shower lingered, a symbol of all the ways I had been excluded, exploited, and silenced. It fueled a fire within me to advocate for those who, like me, were invisible in their own families, their sacrifices unnoticed and their voices unheard. I began speaking out on social platforms, sharing my story with careful honesty, inviting others to find strength in their own boundaries. The response was overwhelming messages of solidarity, tears shared over stories of similar pain, and the slow forging of a community bound by resilience. And then, just when I thought the storm had passed, my phone buzzed with a new message, this time from my mother herself. No lawyer, no polite intermediary. Just raw words, a plea for reconciliation, for understanding, for a chance to rewrite our story. She spoke of regret, of mistakes made in desperation, and of a longing to repair what had been broken. My heart tightened, 1,000 emotions clashing: anger, sorrow, hope, and doubt. Could the woman who had betrayed me so deeply really change? Was there a place for forgiveness in the wake of such pain? I took a deep breath and typed a reply, not a yes, not a no, but a promise I'm willing to talk when the past is faced honestly, and respect is earned. It was a boundary and a bridge all at once, signaling that healing was possible, but only on my terms. As the sun set on that turbulent chapter, I felt a fragile peace settle over me. The road ahead was uncertain, shadowed by the echoes of the past, but illuminated by the strength I'd fought so hard to claim. This was no longer just a story of betrayal and revenge. It was a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and the quiet power of standing up for oneself, no matter the cost. Story 3. I woke up on my 19th birthday to a text from my dad that shattered whatever fragile calm I had left. Sold your laptop. Your sister needs a new phone. Be grateful we feed you. Also, you'll pay her tuition $6,000 by Friday. The words blinked back at me from the screen, cold and cruel. That laptop wasn't just a device, it was my lifeline to school, my tool for work, my future packed into circuits and plastic. And just like that, it was gone. No warning. No conversation. No care. Just sold like I was some expendable thing. I stared at the screen, disbelief washing over me like a cold wave. I didn't feel anger yet, just an overwhelming numbness. Then the reply came seconds later. Get out. You're cut off. No room in the house. No food. No money. No place for me anymore. No chance to explain. No chance to fight back. Just a sentence that felt like a door slammed shut on a chapter of my life. I packed quietly that morning. No yelling. No tears. No drama, just grabbing the essentials and leaving the rest behind. On the kitchen table, I left something I knew they'd never ask for but desperately needed to see: a folder. Scholarship letters. Job offers. Bank statements from a hidden account. And most importantly, my emancipation certificate. Signed and official 6 months ago. They never noticed. They never looked beyond their own selfish needs. That night, I slept on a friend's futon. The silence around me deafening but strangely comforting. No screaming matches. No slammed doors. No judgment, just space. Yet inside, my mind was racing. Not with fear, but a growing resolve. They thought they owned me. That I was theirs to use. To control. To break. But I had already broken free in ways they hadn't even imagined. For years, I had played the quiet kid. The good daughter who took what she was given without complaint. I paid bills without thanks. Fixed things without recognition. Sacrificed my dreams to patch holes in their crumbling facade. But beneath the surface, I was quietly planning my escape. Every scholarship application, every extra shift at the warehouse, every dollar saved in my secret account was a brick in the path out of that toxic house. My family didn't know this. They saw only the surface: the girl who never spoke up, the daughter who never made waves. But when I left, the illusion shattered. My sister panicked. My mom screamed. My dad called everyone he could, desperate for control over a life that was no longer theirs to hold. They called me selfish, ungrateful, a runaway. But I wasn't running away from them. I was running toward myself, toward freedom, respect, and a future I could own. The fight wasn't just for survival. It was for recognition, to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. The rumors spread fast. My family twisted the story to suit their needs, painting me as the villain in their narrative of loss and betrayal. But I refused to engage. Instead, I quietly dropped evidence of my independence into trusted circles, redacted documents proving I was financially and legally free from their control. One cousin, who once believed my family's version, messaged my friend, admitting she didn't understand what had pushed me away, but that it must have been worse than anyone knew. That moment was a turning point. I realized I hadn't just escaped a house, I had escaped a system built on control, silence, and false appearances. Starting over wasn't easy. Moving into a tiny dorm room with a beat-up mattress and shared kitchen was humbling. But it was mine. No locks changed overnight. No looming threats. No guilt hanging over me like storm clouds. It was the first time in years I could breathe without fear. Meanwhile, my family was unraveling. My dad stormed my sister's school, demanding she be allowed to stay, promising I'd pay tuition. My mom sent frantic letters filled with manipulation and blame. My sister tried to guilt my old friends into helping her, but none of their attempts reached me. I was gone legally, physically, emotionally. I filed a police report about the laptop, providing proof of ownership and the transactions. It was never about getting the laptop back, it was about making sure they knew actions have consequences. I updated the scholarship foundation, informing them of my independence and my decision to sever financial ties. They understood immediately I wasn't the first to escape, and I wouldn't be the last. Weeks passed in silence. No slip-ups. No reaching out. Just steady progress toward a life I could call my own. Then came the desperate visits, the emotional blackmail letters, the frantic calls that went unanswered. I saved one letter, scanned it, then tossed the paper, just like the version of me they thought they controlled. Now, I'm building my future on my own terms. No longer the family's ATM, the fixer, or the invisible daughter. I'm Emma, survivor, fighter, and finally free. If you've ever felt invisible or unappreciated, remember this. Sometimes walking away isn't betrayal. It's survival. And sometimes, the family you deserve is the one you choose. The silence that followed my departure wasn't peaceful. It was a storm brewing beneath the surface. I heard whispers, rumors carried by the people I once called family and friends, twisting my story into something unrecognizable. They painted me as selfish, reckless, and ungrateful, the girl who left without a backward glance. But I knew the truth. I knew the nights I spent silently paying their bills, the times I wiped their tears without applause, the countless sacrifices made invisible by their indifference. Their version was a shield to protect themselves from accountability. I stayed off social media, avoided old contacts, and focused on school and work. Every morning felt like a small victory. No more frantic calls, no more guilt trips. Instead, there was calm, the kind of calm that comes not from absence of conflict, but from reclaiming control. My dorm room, though cramped and plain, was my sanctuary, a place where I was just Emma, not the family's fixer or their scapegoat. Yet, the past didn't let go easily. One evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Jordan, my closest friend, and the only person who had been my rock throughout. He told me my dad had shown up at his workplace, trying to intimidate and manipulate. Security had to escort him out. The video footage and witness statements were proof of a man desperate to regain control, but powerless against my decision. That night, I realized freedom wasn't just about physical distance. It was about setting firm boundaries and standing by them no matter what storms came. Then came the letter. No return address. but unmistakably, my mother's handwriting messy. Hurried. Desperate. Inside, pages upon pages of emotional manipulation, accusations of ingratitude, reminders of all they had done for me, and pleas for financial help. The letter ended with a demand for money to help them pay rent after their lease was not renewed because of the mess left behind. They tried to guilt me, to pull me back into their chaotic orbit. But their words felt hollow. I scanned the letter, saved it as a reminder, and then discarded the paper like the past I had shed. The aftermath of my leaving unraveled my family's carefully constructed illusion. My sister's school placed a hold on her account, no tuition, no registration because my dad hadn't paid. My mother spiraled into blame and anger, targeting everyone but herself. My sister's attempts to rally old friends to her cause fell flat. They had seen through the facade too. Throughout all this, I never sought revenge. I didn't sabotage their plans or reach out with threats. I simply lived my truth and let the consequences fall where they may. They had built their house of cards on silence, control, and lies. Once those crumbled, the rest fell apart naturally. They lost not just me, but the narrative they had carefully crafted. I found strength in my quiet resilience. I rebuilt my life from the ashes of that broken home. My scholarship covered most of my tuition. My part-time job helped with daily expenses, and the friendships I cultivated became my new family. I wasn't running away. I was running toward something better. The most profound lesson I learned is, this family is not always about blood. Sometimes, it's about who stands by you when no one else will. Sometimes, it's the friends who become siblings and the strangers who offer shelter. And sometimes, the bravest act is walking away from those who claim to love you, but only bring you pain. As the days turned to weeks, and the weeks to months, I felt the weight of the past lift. I was no longer their invisible daughter. I was Emma, standing tall on her own ground. But freedom has its own battles. As I settled into this new chapter, questions lingered. How would they react when the truth of their neglect became undeniable? Would the family I left behind ever see me for who I really am? And most importantly, could I forgive not them, but myself for staying silent too long? The story is far from over. The path ahead is uncertain. But for the first time in my life, I am walking it on my own terms. The next morning, the quiet in my dorm room felt almost sacred. No phone calls, no messages, just the faint hum of the campus waking up. Yet beneath that calm, the storm from home was intensifying. The letter from my mother had triggered a ripple effect I hadn't fully anticipated. News had traveled fast. The family group chat exploded with anger and confusion. They couldn't believe I had vanished so completely, cutting off every thread that tied me to them. My sister's name was dragged through the mud as the golden child who had failed to hold the family together. The hold on her school account became a symbol of their unraveling, a consequence they refused to face but couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, my dad's relentless attempts to pry into my affairs revealed the desperation of a man losing control over the one thing he thought he owned me. Despite the chaos, I kept my head down. I focused on school, on every assignment, every late-night study session. The pain of abandonment mingled with a fierce determination not just to survive, but to thrive. I wasn't just escaping my family's toxicity. I was forging a new identity, one built on self-respect and autonomy. Jordan became my anchor. Whenever doubt crept in, his steady presence reminded me why I had chosen this path. "You're not just walking away from them," he said one night. "You're walking towards who you're meant to be." His words echoed long after he said them, fueling my resolve. Then came the unexpected twist. An ally emerged from within the chaos. Lena, my cousin, the one who used to side with my sister and believe in their narratives, reached out through Jordan. She didn't contact me directly, but the message was clear. She saw through the lies, the manipulation, and the silent suffering I endured. "They pushed you too far," she confessed. And I think it's worse than we realized. Her words stirred something in me, a mix of validation and sorrow. It was the first acknowledgement that I wasn't alone. That someone on the inside recognized the fractures within the family facade. But it also meant the battle was far from over. Their secrets, their denial, were woven deep into the fabric of our lives. As weeks passed, I took control of my narrative. I uploaded a carefully redacted version of the folder I'd left behind, proof of my emancipation, my scholarship, my independent finances onto a private study group chat. No accusations. No drama. Just facts. The truth, laid bare for those willing to see. The response was immediate. Some classmates reached out with support. Others quietly distanced themselves, unsure how to navigate the family drama. But for me, this was liberation. For the first time, I was no longer defined by their stories or their expectations. Meanwhile, back home, my family grappled with the fallout. My mother's emotional manipulation turned to frustration, my father's anger to despair, and my sister's entitlement collided with harsh reality. Their carefully maintained image shattered, exposing the fragile dynamics they'd worked so hard to conceal. Yet, even as they stumbled, no one reached out to me, not really. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd left behind. It was a reminder that some bridges burn so completely, they cannot be rebuilt, not without fundamental change. In my dorm room, I sat alone one night, reflecting on how far I'd come. The pain, the betrayal, the loss, they still lingered. But beneath them was something new, hope. Hope for a future where I could be unapologetically myself, free from the weight of expectations and disappointment. But the story wasn't finished. There were still wounds to heal, truths to confront, and choices to make. Could I forgive my family? Could I forgive myself for staying silent so long? And most importantly, how would I rise from the ashes, stronger than before? The days that followed were a strange mixture of silence and chaos. At school, I was a ghost, slipping through hallways and classrooms. My mind split between lectures and the storm unfolding back home. Every so often, Jordan's texts would flicker across my screen, updates on what my family was doing. Rumors damage control attempts that only made things worse. Yet despite the mess, I felt strangely detached, as if I had stepped out of their world and into my own, where their rules no longer applied. But even in my new life, the past clung stubbornly. One evening, as I studied late in the library, my phone vibrated. A message from Lena, the cousin who had seen the truth. "We need to talk. It's about them. And you." My heart skipped. What could she want now? After all this, meeting Lena was like unlocking a door I hadn't realized was shut. She was quieter than I remembered. Her usual confident smile replaced by something softer, vulnerable even. She confessed that she had long felt trapped by family expectations, caught in the same web of silence and denial that had nearly destroyed me. But seeing me break free had awakened something in her, a longing for honesty, for change. She revealed secrets I hadn't known, whispered conversations about money disappearing, family members turning a blind eye to each other's pain, and plans to keep appearances at all costs. It was a family fractured not just by me leaving, but by years of neglect and unspoken grievances. Suddenly, my rebellion wasn't just a rupture, it was a symptom of something much deeper. That night, Lena's words haunted me. Was I the only one paying the price for this silence, or were we all prisoners of a family legacy none of us truly chose? The more she spoke, the clearer it became my departure had forced cracks in the foundation. Cracks that could either crumble everything or be the start of something new. Back in my dorm, I wrestled with conflicting feelings, anger at being abandoned, sadness for the family I once wished I had, and a reluctant hope that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. But could it come without forgiveness, without confronting the lies and betrayal? The next morning, I found a package at my door. No return address. Inside was a worn photo album, filled with pictures of childhood birthdays, holidays, and long ago family vacations. At the back was a note, barely legible. Remember who you are. We're not perfect, but we're still your family. The gesture hit me harder than any words. It was a fragile olive branch, a call from the past that stirred memories I'd tried to bury. But it was also a test. Would I answer, or would I keep walking away? Meanwhile, my family's facade was crumbling faster than I imagined. My mother's emotional manipulation escalated into desperate pleas through friends and distant relatives, while my sister's entitlement met the cold reality of halted tuition payments and overdue bills. My father, once so controlling, was now fractured and frantic, grasping at any thread to regain control. Their once coordinated defense against me was now a chaotic scramble. Accusations flew. Secrets spilled. Alliances shifted. They blamed each other with bitter words, none willing to face the truth that their family was unraveling because of the very neglect and silence they'd perpetuated for years. Yet amidst their breakdown, no one truly reached out to me. No sincere apologies. No attempts to understand. Just empty words thrown like stones, trying to wound, but failing to reach their target. It was the cruel irony of it all. The family that had once defined me was now powerless to hurt me, because I had finally chosen myself. In my Kiat dorm room, I closed the photo album and looked around at the life I was building, a life of my own making, free from their shadows. But the question remained, was freedom enough? Or was there a deeper reckoning still waiting on the horizon? That reckoning arrived sooner than I expected. One rainy afternoon, a knock at the door startled me. I opened it to find an unfamiliar woman, Jessica, a family friend turned unexpected messenger. She held a letter from my mother, accompanied by a single, trembling request, a chance to talk. Not to beg, but to explain. To reach out beyond the walls we'd all built. Her presence unsettled me. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut, to refuse any further connection. But another part, one I hadn't felt in a long time, flickered with cautious curiosity. Could this be the start of a new chapter? Or was it another layer of the same old story? Jessica stepped inside quietly, her eyes scanning the room with a mix of sympathy and caution. She wasn't just a messenger. She was a reminder of a world I had left behind, a world tangled with broken promises and half-truths. She wants to talk, Jessica said softly, handing me the letter. Says it's important. Says she knows she hurt you. I looked down at the paper, the handwriting shaky but unmistakably my mother's. I felt a strange awe, a tug between anger and something softer, like the memory of lullabies long forgotten. He hesitated, then nodded. Okay, I said. I'll listen. We sat down, and Jessica began to relay my mother's words, words of regret, of missed chances, of a love buried beneath years of silence and neglect. My mother admitted her mistakes, the way she'd let expectations suffocate her love, how fear and pride had built walls instead of bridges. For the first time, there was an apology not veiled by excuses or demands. It was raw, vulnerable, and fragile, a whisper in the storm. Listening, I felt the weight on my chest loosen. Just a little. But alongside that relief came a cold realization. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a journey, and I wasn't sure where it would lead. Jessica looked at me, searching for a sign. What do you want to do? She asked. I took a deep breath and said, I want to hear her, but on my terms. Over the next few weeks, the conversations with my mother were slow, tentative. Phone calls first, then texts, eventually video chats. We navigated a minefield of emotions, anger surfacing and fading, memories reshaping, boundaries drawn and redrawn. Each exchange chipped away at the walls we'd built, but also reminded me how much had been lost to neglect and silence. My sister, meanwhile, remained a ghost in this new dynamic. She texted occasionally, her messages filled with guilt and defensiveness, but never enough to bridge the gap. I realized her version of family was still wrapped in entitlement and avoidance. And no matter how much I wanted to rewrite that story, some chapters might never change. One evening, after a particularly honest conversation with my mother, I sat alone in my dorm room, scrolling through photos from years ago. There we were, smiling, laughing, a family whole and hopeful. The contrast to today was stark. I closed my eyes and let the memories wash over me. The pain and love intertwined like threads in a tapestry. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Lena, the cousin who had opened the door to truth. There's something you should know. It's about Dad. Call me. The simple text sent a ripple through my calm. What could be worse than what we'd already endured? I swallowed hard, bracing myself for whatever lay ahead. The next day, Lena met me at a quiet cafe. Her face serious, eyes wary. Dad's health is worse than he lets on, she began. He's hiding it. Mom's been overwhelmed. Things are unraveling faster than we thought. She paused, then added, and the family secrets. They're deeper than we knew. There's more at stake here than just money or grudges. My mind raced, the threads of the past twisting into a knot of uncertainty and fear. What else had they been hiding? How much had been sacrificed for pride? And what would it cost if the truth came out? Back at campus, I found myself at a crossroads. The path to peace wasn't clear or easy. It demanded courage, patience, and a willingness to confront shadows I'd long avoided. But it also offered something precious, the chance to reclaim my story, to redefine family on my own terms. As I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, I realized that the journey ahead was mine alone to walk. With each step, I'd carry the scars of the past, but also the strength to build something new, something real. And just as I was ready to move forward, my phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from an unknown number. It read simply, "Be careful who you trust.